Hi everybody. In this interview, I talked to Jo Cleary. Her life got so bad because of her CFS that at one point she made a serious attempt at ending her life. Fortunately, she survived and turned her life around. So in this video, she talks about what helped her, the low points, and what got her back on track, including brain training and her faith. And her top tips if what you've tried hasn't worked. So what look forward to this enjoy this video. If you've got any questions for Jo, post them in the chat and I'll get Jo to respond to them. All right, so I'm going to sit back and watch the interview. Hi Jo, tell us first of all where you are in the world.
Well, I live in Coventry in England, but I'm actually at my mum's house in the lovely rural village in Warwickshire at the moment.
Fantastic. So, Jo, we're here today to find out your recovery story. Tell us where it all started.
So I guess back in 2010, I was in my 30s and I was living a busy life. I worked as a community psychiatric nurse. I went to the gym, I was involved with my church. I was physically well, I didn't have any conditions or illnesses. And my job was pretty stressful, as you can imagine. I had experienced quite a few viruses and ill health, and I got another virus, and this time I just didn't seem to get any better. Then one day I had a massive crash. I crawled onto the sofa and I luckily had my phone close enough to me to call my mum. She picked me up and came and got me, and I went and stayed at her house for quite some time then and was pretty much confined to bed after that.
Right. So, sorry to hear that. What did you think was wrong?
Well, I went to the hospital and I had various tests. They couldn't find anything wrong, so they gave me a possible diagnosis of post-viral syndrome. And I said, well, how long will it take to get better? Because, I want to know when I can go back to work. Is it going to be days, weeks? And the doctor said, we don't know. Then I went onto the internet and I started Googling post-viral syndrome, which was probably not that helpful, to be honest, because I found a lot of really kind of scary stuff about chronic fatigue and post-viral syndrome and ME. And not long after that, I had the crash, and then the internet searching stopped because I didn't have the energy to do that. But all of what I'd read stuck in my head, and it terrified me, to be honest.
So, can you elaborate on that? What was going on in your head?
Well, I was remembering all of the things I'd read about chronic fatigue and ME, and people being really unwell with it and not recovering, and that there was no cure. So all of the kind of hopeless stuff. And back in 2010, there just didn't seem to be much recovery focus. It's wonderful now that that has changed, but yeah, that was really what was going around my mind, and fear of getting worse. Because I'd read about, if you try and do too much, you can crash. So a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty.
Right. Right, gosh. When was this? Just to put this in a time context.
So this was in 2010. I think it was probably the summertime that I got unwell, and then into the autumn when I was bedbound for a period of time for about 6 months at my mum's house.
Right. And I was just going to ask you, what life was like, but that sounds as if it was pretty challenging. Tell us a bit more about what that was like for you, just being bedbound for that amount of time.
So there was a lot of really unpleasant symptoms. I think probably the worst one was temperature regulation. So I'd really feel like I was burning up my whole upper half of my body. So I had a chillo pillow, and even when it was quite cold, the window was open because I really struggled with that.
What is a chillo pillow?
Oh, okay. So it's like a gel pillow that you can put in the freezer and it stays cool. And
Right,
it's really good if you're too hot.
right. Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, yeah, so sorry, carry on.
So the other thing that I found extremely challenging was the insomnia. I would be awake pretty much all the night, and that was when I felt most lonely, and that's when my mind was very active around. I guess just it was a lonely time anyway because I wasn't really well enough to have visitors or talk to people. But the nighttime seemed particularly lonely, and I used to do things in my head like imagine that my friends were with me, imagine that I was dancing, um, sing songs to myself, think about the past, just anything I could do really to try and get through the night because it seemed just unbearably long.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. And what help did you get from, the health service?
So my GP was really helpful. She tried to speak about the diagnosis in a hopeful way um, that I would get better. I got a referral to an ME clinic, but I didn't actually get to see them because they couldn't come and see me at home. So it was only once I got better that I actually went to the clinic, at which point they saw that I was better and they discharged me. Um, I also got visits from a physio, which was disastrous, um, from an OT, which was better. And I got some equipment and some recommendations through that. Um, and I did get support from the mental health team as well because my mood, I became depressed because of my situation.
Yeah, that's understandable. So what was the lowest point of, this journey?
The lowest point was actually after I thought I had recovered. Um, so I managed to get better in quite an unusual way. Um, and I was, I felt I was completely well, but I had a lot of unhealthy kind of mindsets going on. I felt really guilty that I'd taken time off work. I felt that I'd let people down. So I rushed back to work without any kind of thought of balance or self care or nurture or giving myself time, and went to do a lightning process course, um, which is a mind body connection training. And at that point, I was already in a bit of a state, to be honest. So I was in a lot of doubt about whether it could help me. And I went to a couple of days of the course, but I didn't complete it. And I had another crash. Um, and at that point, I became very hopeless. I still believed that things like the lightning process and mind body connection could work, but I didn't believe they could work for me. I felt somehow that I'd had my go at that and I'd failed. Um, and we were away on holiday, which was hard anyway, because adjusting to a new environment, traveling in the car, lying on the back seat, all of those things were hugely anxiety provoking because of the physical effort of them. Staying in a cottage, um, it was horrible. And obviously, I couldn't go out and I couldn't do anything. So, my family, um, someone would stay with me and then they might go out. And the one day, for a short period of time, I was left alone. And I just thought, this is my opportunity. I could see my life ahead of me. I could see my mum. She was getting older. She was caring for me full time. I was a burden to her. What would happen, if something happened to her? And I could just see my life ahead, that I was going to get more and more unwell. I might end up in some kind of institution or hospital. The thought of that was just so unbearable. And my thinking was so distorted at that time that I thought the best thing I could do was to take that opportunity to end my life. Um, So I made an attempt. Thankfully, now, I wasn't thankful at the time, but thankfully, I was taken to hospital by the police and the ambulance, and received treatment and survived. And I know it seems really strange to say that that was a turning point, but it was, because afterwards I thought to myself, I can't do that again. I could see the pain and the hurt that it had caused to my family, who definitely didn't think it was the best idea, didn't see me as a burden, just wanted to care for and love me. And I thought, well, if I can't do that again, I've got to do something. There's got to be some way out of this. And I began to look for that way. And I thought maybe I should give the lightning process another go. So I asked my mum to call a practitioner, and the practitioner said, yeah, I'm happy to work with Jo, but she needs to talk to me herself. That's what I did. And from then on, everything changed.
So tell us a little bit more about that. What is it that you learned that helped you change things?
So I learned that our bodies can generate fight and flight. As we all know, we can get into without necessarily even realizing that we're particularly anxious or fearful, but on a subconscious level, our bodies are in a state of physiological arousal. And our brain is really just a piece of software. And the more we practice something, the stronger that gets in our brain, the easier it is for our brain to create pain or a symptom or fatigue. But that we could learn to reprogram our brain, that we actually had a huge amount of influence over our physiological state, our emotional state. And I learned through a series of activities and practice that I could start to change my state again, that I could calm my body, that I could release all of the natural, the healing potential that was there, and I could learn to reprogram my brain to health and wellness.
Amazing. And tell us a bit more about the consequences of learning that stuff. How did that affect the way your life looked like?
Well, a huge effect, because clearly I was well, I was able to drive, I was able to exercise. I actually decided to leave my job and I started a new career. So the biggest impact was physical recovery, but also it changed some of the ways that I approached life. And I learned to live in a more balanced way. I learned to process my emotions in a more healthy way. So it had lots of kind of positive side effects, if you like. When you take a medication, sometimes the side effects are negative. But with this, I had the physical recovery, but then I had these positive side effects of being more confident, more calm, more able to say no, and just to live a more balanced life.
Amazing. And so, what would you say to someone who said, does this, if you got well using these mind body approaches, does that mean the illness is all in your head?
I can completely understand why people sometimes think that. And I think it's really important to challenge that, because I would say that ME is a complex multi-system physiological illness, and so would most people who recommend mind-body approaches. But a couple of really simple examples that I heard: if you think about something like blushing, our face physically changes colour, or yawning. Sometimes you might yawn just because you've heard me say the word, or you've seen it on TV, or you've read it in a book. That is a physiological response, yet it's caused by our mind or something we're thinking or feeling. So there are lots of things like that in life. And nowadays, there are many health conditions that benefit from approaches like mindfulness or learning how to regulate our emotions or to think differently. Because actually, we're not body and mind. They're not these two separate things. They're completely intertwined in our holistic beings.
Right, got you. And how did being ill and recovery impact your spiritual life and beliefs?
So uh, I've been a Christian for a number of years now, and when I first got unwell, um, it was actually a really positive time. Although on the one hand, I was struggling with all of these fears and anxieties about the illness that I thought I might have and would I get well. On the other hand, all the busyness had stopped, and I just had this time to be uh, at that time right at the start. I could listen to music, so I listened to worship music and I prayed, and I just felt a real sense of God with me. It was a really, really powerful and beautiful spiritual time. Then actually, as I didn't get better, I started to lose my faith. That was really challenging for me. Why would God let this happen to me? But there were some amazing things that happened that showed me, even in those really dark and difficult moments, that God hadn't forgotten me. He was there with me. And I feel like the way I got well was a gift to me. I feel it was something that, um, as I've talked about, has changed my life for the better in terms of my overall sense of peace and happiness, um, and it really aligns with what I believe as well. So the lady that first told me about the lightning process was not somebody I knew. It was my mum's friend's hairdresser's client who wrote me a letter. And that was how I heard about it. And in this letter, she said, I'm a Christian, and I've done this thing called the lightning process, and I believe it's actually really in line with what the Bible teaches. And so receiving that letter, even though she didn't know that I was a Christian when she sent it, it helped me to think, well, maybe this is something that I can embrace. And as I got well, I realized that it was completely what, some Bible verses talk about, the renewing of our mind, being transformed, what we focus our minds on. So I believe that I received healing, and some people do get healed just from prayer itself. But for me, I felt that actually God had given me this gift, and He wanted me to partner with Him in receiving this wonderful thing, this healing that He had for me. And part of that was to actually not just get well and forget all about it, but to do something that might bring hope to other people who are in that situation.
Amazing. That's very interesting. Is there anything else you'd add about the overlap between the lightning process and your spiritual beliefs?
I guess that knowing that people were praying for me was really important, and that gave me a great deal of comfort. There were times when I felt so low and distressed. I remember one time I was in tears, and my mum came in and she just said, oh, she was crying too, and we were both in a real state. We both felt so hopeless. And at that moment, the doorbell rang, and the local vicar had heard that I was staying at my mum's and had come round to see me. And it was almost like, wow, even though I'm stuck in this situation, I'm not forgotten. There were moments like that God showed me that there was something better, and that He, there was a plan. But yeah, I guess having to take that part in it, that it wasn't a passive thing, that I needed to actively get involved in pursuing that recovery and what was there for me.
So thanks for elaborating on that. So obviously, there are some people who say I've done the lightning process and it hasn't helped me. What would you say to those people? What sense do you make of that?
I can understand that, because obviously the first time I tried it, it didn't go how I hoped. I guess what I would say is don't give up. Healing is a journey that is quite often not linear. Sometimes it feels really challenging, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and it doesn't feel like you're getting anywhere. But I think it's really important to hold on to hope, and I think it's really important to say, okay, that hasn't worked at this point for me, and start getting curious in a compassionate way about maybe what was going on there, what might be the next step. So I think my reaction when it didn't work the first time was just like, I went into catastrophe mode. This is it. Nothing's going to work. I have no hope. The one thing that I thought was going to work for me hasn't. But if you can just keep persevering, which is really hard. Actually, it's really hard to persevere when things don't work out. But to keep going, keep surrounding yourself with those positive stories of other people who have recovered, and keeping in mind that it is possible, and it can be possible for me. I just haven't quite found my route yet, and I'm going to keep looking, and maybe my route might even be that thing I tried before and it didn't go as I planned. Maybe second time around it will. Or maybe I'm going to look at that kind of approach but in a slightly different way, working with a different practitioner, or I got well from the lightning process, but it's not the only approach. There are lots of other things out there, and I think it's important to find the approach that resonates with you and the people that you feel that you can work with effectively in that. So keep going.
Great. And you've kind of touched into my next question, but I'll just see if there's anything else you want to add on it, which is, what would you say to someone who's feeling hopeless right now?
I'd say that I understand, and don't beat yourself up for feeling hopeless, because it is so easy to feel hopeless. This is a really challenging, debilitating condition, and you are not alone. There are many people out there who are also feeling this way. But in that hopelessness, just sit with it, and it will pass. It will pass, and something will come, some glimmer, some new direction, something that just says, I can, take this next step. Sometimes you have to just go through a minute at a time, because getting through an hour at a time feels too hard. But yeah, we understand. Lots of us have been there, but we also know that it is possible to have a different life, and we just want to encourage you that you can.
That's a great message, and certainly that's something that would have really helped me when I had ME CFS. So bring us up to date. You did it the second time. It got you well. Tell us what else happens between then and now.
A lot. So that was back in September 2011. I started a whole new career. So I now work as a learning and development manager for a care company. I get to do really cool things, like I even host a podcast now. And I get to train the most brilliant people and work with our teams. I also met my husband and got married. I never thought I'd get married, but I did. And we're celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year. So next month we are heading off to Lanzarote to go back to where we had our honeymoon. I have been up Snowdon. I've trained. I've run Race for Life. I ran 10 kilometers. That was my personal best before I decided that I quite liked my knees. So yeah, life is really good. I have a church that I'm involved with now, which I really love. Me and a group of people, we go out onto the streets in Coventry and we pray for people, which is wonderful. We absolutely love doing that. and we see lots of amazing things happen through that as well. I have lots of time that I spend just doing things that I love that bring me joy, because I think that's really important. So walking in nature. I'm an introvert, so I love a bit of alone time, especially as my job is quite peoply. I like to just, like take myself off to a National Trust place on a day off and sit and, listen to the birds. And I love mindfulness and centering prayer. So I feel, yeah, at age 47, I'm probably fitter and happier than I've ever been.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. And tell us a bit about the Facebook group you started.
Yeah, so the group is called Community of Hope, and that name is a name that came into my head. I believe God gave me that name, and really wanted a place that could celebrate recovery stories. Because, as I mentioned earlier, back in 2010, there didn't seem to be much when you did a Google search about recovering from CFS or ME. There didn't seem to be many Facebook groups or pages. There might have been individual practitioners or approaches, but there wasn't much else. And now, to my delight, Community of Hope is just one of many, many recovery focused groups online that I come across all of the time. So it's not the busiest group, but it is a great celebratory, hopeful place. So we share recovery stories, and we have some rules. So the group's not for everyone, but we keep posts and comments recovery focused. So it's not like a traditional ME support group. And one of the other rules is not to kind of challenge people's stories, because for me, when I first started to share that I'd recovered, unfortunately, not everyone's response to that was positive. I got some trolling, I got some real kind of negative, I'm not going to say negative people, I'm going to say negative comments, because unfortunately, those people have their own stories and their own reasons why they were in that place. But they said some pretty horrible things to me.
Yeah, what sort of things were they saying, Jo?
So they were saying that I obviously hadn't been ill in the first place, I hadn't really had ME or CFS, that I was trying to make money out of other people, and that I was profiting from sick people, and that was evil. Well, there was no money. I was running a free Facebook group. I was giving up my free time to share my story. But unfortunately, people had got this view that anyone who wants to help people recover might have some ulterior motive or agenda. So yeah, it wasn't a good response, but sadly not uncommon. When I've talked to other people, they've had similar responses, and that's why I think it was so important to create different spaces online where that wasn't okay. That it wasn't okay to say, oh, well, you can't have been really ill, or I don't believe your story, or well, that's rubbish, that doesn't work. And just to say that's someone's story and they're sharing it out of good intentions. If you don't believe it, if you don't like the approach they used, then just that's fine, but you don't need to tell them that. So we wanted to create a space where it felt easy to share stories, but also just that they could be celebrated. And it's great. We had a story this week. Somebody I requested that they join the group to share their recovery, and they did. I was very grateful for that. And we got some lovely comments from other people just saying, thank you so much for sharing. We're so thrilled that you've recovered, which unfortunately wouldn't be the case everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is great that, you have created that safe space where people can share those sort of stories. People who are having those kind of negative reactions have got their own stuff going on. But it just saddens me that, for a group of people who experience a lot of gaslighting, to be gaslit by other members of the community is just very sad. So, Jo, let's finish off then. What would be your top tips, either that you'd give yourself when you first got sick or for other people?
I think my top tips would be learn to feel your emotions. I think a lot of illness is created by just not being able to process our emotions in healthy ways. And that leads to stress, and it leads to guilt, and it leads to lots of, denying uncomfortable feelings. And just learning to be compassionate to ourselves and others is huge. And keeping going, keeping hoping, and keeping looking for the positive stories of the people who have recovered, rather than focusing on all of the other stuff that's out there.
Amazing. Well, listen, Jo, thank you for sharing your story. Like your family, very pleased that you didn't commit suicide, that you are still here. It's an important topic, and I would say if anyone is feeling suicidal, please reach out, let people know how you're feeling, let them understand what you're going through, because I'm sure they would be, very saddened to understand that's what was going on for you. So thank you, Jo, for sharing your story. It's really important, and it's great to add another recovery story to the growing number of people who have recovered.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, Simon. It's been really good to chat with you.
You are very welcome. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.